Welcome, world. Ecussionist, aka Matt Borzimer, reporting live from the studio here in Durham, North Carolina, bringing you lesson number 9 from this very fine first trimester in 2025. We bring you live, real time lessons for all ages and all levels across the platform, run by NGO Radio Terra's YouTube channel. Thank you so much, NGO Radio Terra, for always hosting these fantastic lessons where we get to bring the world some of our knowledge that we've attained over the years as music professionals and students as well. And go ahead and disseminate this information to those of us who are joining us today in the chat. So if you want to say what's up in the chat, please type something. And also feel free to email me at ecussionist@gmail.com. That's ECUSSIONIST@gmail.com. I wanted to play a little bit today and open up and warm my muscles up with some ideas, starting out with the very mindful buzz roll. This might be one of my favorite rudiments of all time because this rudiment right here represents the romance between your right and left hand. It represents how your right hand and your left hand are very different. While they have the same function, they're used different amounts, and very few people are completely ambidextrous in both hands and feet. I think as a drummer, we get to be a little bit more ambidextrous because we have to sort of do the same thing that we do with our right hand on the drums with our left hand. Same thing with the right leg and left leg, so on and so forth. But I do find that even as drummers, we're somewhat lopsided, and some of us tend to lean more to one side or the other. And our hands, they might look differently when we're holding the stick. If you noticed how when I was in the middle of my roll, my right hand might have certainly looked different than my left hand, and that's for a very good reason. I've also learned to embrace that. And so with the buzz roll, we sort of come to the romance between right and left and create this harmony of bounces. And it really also represents what waveforms look like. When things are very low and slow, the waveforms take a long time to travel and they look much larger. And as the waveform gets smaller and tighter and higher, and the waveform starts to go like this, it starts to create not bounces or not individual rhythms, but a solid tone. That's when you get to, go from this to this. It does create a tone once you're buzzing that fast. It's very useful. It takes a lot of patience, and today I want to talk about patience. I want to talk about some of the often not discussed parts of the drum world. I want to discuss my experience as a drummer, and I also want to read a couple things from my notes over the years. Talk about some concepts that might help. So thanks for sitting through the drum solo in the beginning of this lesson. Looking forward to going back and checking out what I did and what I played. One of the things I do to be mindful of my growth is I tape and record everything, and then I do take the time to go back and listen to almost everything I do. And I think that is something that's really aided me in becoming the growthful musician that I am. Over the years, I feel like I've shown a tremendous amount of growth through the periods of growth that I was growing in. And I did that in front of other musicians, and I think that musicians always saw, wow, Matt's always in the shed and Matt's always getting better. And I realized that was sort of my calling card, if you will, that if I was the most prepared that I could possibly be, and the most prepared to grow and the most prepared to take responsibility for my practicing, then I would grow the most. And that is really the biggest thing I can promise anybody that I'm working with, is my absolute and utter commitment to my musical growth. So when you see me next week, I'll sound different. And that's how I felt about this entire trimester. From week to week, I listen back to myself and I think, wow, I've really grown this much, or not at all. Maybe I've taken steps back even. But usually I never say that to myself. I never say I've taken steps back. Everything is a learning experience, and even when you take an L, we shouldn't say that that's a loss. We should say that we learned, we took a lesson, we learned something. I brought up a word, preparation, which is something that I want to start out with, and this is like one of the biggest mottos that I run my life with, and that is that it's a motto about the performance mindset. And here it goes. This is what it is. Preparation minus self-interference equals performance. All right? I'll say that again. Preparation minus self-interference equals performance. And that's important because we do so much work in order to get ourselves ready for the gig, but seldom do we do the work to remember what we need to feel like and think like when we're on the gig and actually doing the thing that we did so much preparation for. Usually, if we don't, it's because it comes in the form of some type of self-sabotage or self-interference. That could be intoxicants, self-medicating before the gig. It could be not having enough sleep or having too much sleep. It could be being super full. It could be being emotionally drained. It could be a lot of different things. So we need to make sure that we're doing as little self-sabotage or self-interference as possible when we're in the heat of the moment of performance. And then there is the performance part of the equation, which is the outcome of your preparation minus the self-interference. The reason why the self-interference is such an important variable is because it is the one thing that I believe could get in the way of a really fantastic performance. So making sure that your headspace is in proper place is really the thing. Being a drummer requires the delicate balance of self-care in the mental department and in the physical department, because so much of what we do, while it is mental, also requires our muscular readiness. At any moment, these muscles need to fire and they need to be able to present the ideas that the brain is thinking. Part of the preparation for a drummer is making sure that those muscles are practiced and ready to go, so that the creative ideas that you as a drummer have can come to fruition. What you're thinking and intending on playing actually comes out in reality. So we want to make sure that these things that we're talking about stay with us. We want to create lasting change as a musician. So we need to practice our awareness. That comes with the ability to, say, record yourself, right? Having the awareness is only possible when you actually have receipts. So keep your own receipts and make sure that you have the ability to go back and listen to how you sound. Another thing that's important is to be aware of the internal conversation that you're having. And that speaks directly to the self-sabotage or self-interference part. How are you talking to yourself before you head to the stage or the court or whatever form your job takes place in? Understand, or try to understand, where these self-talk thoughts are coming from. Are you being judgmental of yourself? Are you psyching yourself up? Encourage improvement to yourself, and always add to your conversation what you know to be true in the moment that is actually working. And that's really one of the most important things, because a lot of the things that aren't working may even be out of our control, and yet we pine over them and allow them to distract us from the moment and the goal at hand. Really, all we need to be doing is focusing on that which we can control. If we were so prepared, then most everything that we could control, we would be controlling. Everything that's out of our control that could be interfering with the performance being great, we can work with, as long as it's not self-interference. Practicing reinforcement and feedback brings the improvement. Practicing doesn't make perfect. Practice makes habits. Practice saying such supportive thoughts to yourself, and notice how you feel after saying these supportive thoughts versus when you don't. Notice maybe even the outcome of your performance. If you did this experiment, which you may not be able to afford to be able to do, but let's say you're a student at a music school, you have enough performances ahead of you to be able to experiment like this. Try talking to yourself in a way that is potentially lesser than before you go into a performance, right? It shouldn't be too hard because we tend to beat ourselves up. And then be aware and then record that performance and then be aware of talking to yourself in a very, very positive way before you go into the next recorded performance. Listen back to the difference between both of those performances and find out what actually happened. Do a little experiment. Let's talk about our professional style, and this can really help us navigate dealing with other musicians. Are we an analytical musician? Are we a driver type of musician? Are we an amiable musician? AKA, are we easygoing and always wanting to work with others in a way that is best for them? Or are we an expressive musician? Someone who likes to talk a lot and who likes to use their big voice to do big things? We can be a little bit of all these different types of musicians, but I think it's important to know when we are maybe dominating the conversation. Are we being a driver or are we being the expressive? You know, if we're being pushed around, are we being the analytical one or the amiable one? Knowing the different personality types that you can run into, and by no means is the world just black or white or split up into fear and love or split up into analytical, driver, amiable, expressive musicians or personality types. But if we can understand who we are in the face of the professional landscape and how we work, we can maybe link up with different musicians, producers, arrangers, band leaders better and avoid other ones that don't suit our personality type or musician style. Are you a driver analytical? Are you a analytical expressive? Are you an amiable driver? Are you an analytical? I mean, you can be a combination of all these different things, and spending time with yourself to understand how you work is really my point here. Be aware of how much time you take up and how much space you take up in a room, in a conversation. Be aware of if you tend to find yourself being invited or not. Measure how you feel and move on. Know that no situation stays the same and everything passes. But we can be a little bit better suited for the gig of choice if we know exactly who we want to work with and how we want to work. Some of the strengths that an analytical person has, for instance, is that they're objective, precise, controlled, rational. Some of the weaknesses, though, can be that they're aloof, picky, impersonal, righteous. Some of the positive strengths of being a driver is being decisive, tough, candid, efficient, pragmatic. You know, some of those weaknesses, though, can show up like being overbearing, insensitive, pressuring, and cold. On the side of being expressive, the strengths over there is being creative, enthusiastic, sense of humor, being energetic, focusing on vision. The weaknesses can be that you're excitable, not focused, high-strung, maybe lack detail. Finally, some of the strengths of being an amiable personality type is being supportive, empathetic, loyal, reliable, and understanding. And the weaknesses over there are that you could be overly complying, being a pushover, being a follower, being soft. None of these things are bad, and I think that we all do harbor each one of these personality types as musicians in ourselves. But this would help you to know how best you get down within a musical situation and allow you a little bit more latitude in the professional world. It's all about being flexible. I found myself to be somebody, as a drummer especially, that we have to be the most flexible because we have to show up before everybody else and leave after everybody. And that puts us in the line of fire dealing with wait staff, dealing with parking issues, dealing with all sorts of stuff on the front end of the gig, the load in, dealing with managers, GMs, band leaders, what have you, on the front end and on the back end, dealing with drunk people at the end of the night, dealing with having to get paid, dealing with maybe even having to get paid last. A lot goes into being the drummer and being the heartbeat of a band, and some of it's not always fun, and some of it requires us to have even more responsibility than everybody else. Kind of puts us in a leadership role. Drummers are leaders, and they are people who have to be side people as well. We have to know how to do things right, right? And we also know how to be people that do the right thing. We need to be people who are good at coping with complexity, and we also need to be good at people who are good at coping with change. Drummers need to be good at managing and handling things and maintaining order and being organized. We also have to have a kinesthetic feel, right? We have to have a sense of movement, and we have a boundless desire to travel and be everywhere. Most drummers do, unless you're somebody who just wants to stay at home and work in the studio. You know, we have to be concerned about how things get done, because logistics are so important for our load in and for us having to have a car or take the train or show up 2 hours earlier, and that requires us knowing the schedule of certain things that other musicians simply don't have to think about. Drummers, but also us drummers also have to be concerned with things that, well, we can't be so clinical. We have to be aware of architecting things that also work with people's personality types and their desires. We have to be strong enough to know when to hold it down and to be persistent, and then also when to acquiesce and be team players. So I think that's some of how to stay mentally strong in the drumming game and keep yourself awake and keep yourself on the up and up with other musicians and music industry professionals. Some things I want to talk about are the physical side of keeping ourselves healthy. And while we only have a couple minutes, I'm going to go over a little bit over today so I can demonstrate some do's and don'ts. One of the immediate things I can tell you about is when you're picking things up as drummers, pick things up directly. All right? If I want to pick up this drum pad right here and lift it, excuse me, lift it over here, I shouldn't face forward, grab it while facing forward and move it over here. I should stand up, turn the direction that the piece of gear is in, bend with my knees, and lift up the piece of gear and move it over to this side. Always be in the direction. Even if it's something as a piece of paper, you can't see that there's a piece of paper right here, or even this, let's say this snare drum, all right? If I want to change the snare drum out, what I have to do is face this way towards this, even just something as light as this drum, and I'm in a seated position, so that's fine, but make sure that my knees are bent. Grab the piece of gear, stand up, rotate, all right? How I'm doing it is fine now, these types of movements, but it's just really about being direct. Same thing with things that are low to the ground, all right? I need this snare drum stand to go down. I'm going to bend with my knees, not my back, okay? You can't really see it, but I'm going to bend with my knees this way, not like this. All right? Bend with your knees, not your lower back. Always. So bending with my knees, putting the pressure in my thighs, lowering the snare drum stand. Now, same thing. The snare drum is over here to my left. Instead of reaching over while facing forward to my left to pick it up, I'm going to turn to my left. Like such, bend my knees, lift up, turn this way. Now, upon sitting it down, I can sit down on my seat and set down the drum, just like so. It's about being this meticulous in order so that you can preserve your back and preserve your good posture. One of the things that I really stress is making sure that you know what good form looks like. I'm going to come over here so that you can see me standing. Proper good form in terms of bending over for picking up gear. keeping your hips and your glutes as flat to the ground as possible. Not this way. Like this, picking it up and lifting up slowly. So important. I can't stress it enough. Another kind of drum-based stretch that I think is super important for all drummers to know about is this. Raise it up. Something that I always do when I'm playing fast tempos or things that I really need to maintain my breath on is breathe the biggest breath that I possibly can all the way from the bottom of the floor through the crown in my head all the way to the heavens. The biggest possible breath ever while you're maintaining the groove, while you're playing, doing what you're doing. It's so important to be able to know how to breathe while you're on the drum set and playing. Add space into your drumming so that you can actually feel what that's like. Allowing the space allows for you to have breath, literally and metaphysically. so much for hanging out with me here. This is lesson number 9 of the first trimester here in the 2025 year. NGO Radio Terra is supporting this whole thing, doing free lessons for all levels and all ages. I want to shout out all my sponsors: Roland Corporation, Tamburo Drums, Icon Microphones, the Proel Company, and we got some more partnerships coming pretty soon. So yeah, thank you so much to all of the people that support us, and we're going to keep on bringing you nothing but the finest in drum lessons, music lessons, and really just lessons about how to conduct yourself in life as a musician in the industry that we possibly can. Every single week, I'm here Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you so much. MV, aka Ecussionist, is out. I want to give a big shout out to one of my mentors, Hank Feiger, also another mentor of mine, Billy Hart, and my father as well, who's a fantastic artist and healer. So all these people have really helped me format some of these ideas today. Thanks so much for listening.